Hello everybody, welcome back. Jordan Nelson here. So I had a meeting with a couple whose wedding film I'm going to be doing in the next year. But during the meeting they said something that was really interesting. They said that when they were shopping around for wedding videographers, they had a handful that they were watching their work, that they were considering booking, that their footage and their videos were really shaky. So during the ceremony, there was just a lot of shake to the camera. And I thought that was really insightful because sometimes I just get the impression that, you know, just your average everyday person doesn't really pay attention to stuff like that or isn't that distracting to them. And just, you know, here on YouTube, we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And wedding videographers are obviously thinking about it. People in the video creator field are thinking about this stuff. But this is a wedding videography client, potentially, that I'm meeting with, and it's something that they say was distracting that they noticed. They're not video people. So when I heard that, what that kind of told me is that this stuff really is important to couples. They don't want to be distracted by that kind of stuff. They want a clean, crisp video. So if you want to book more weddings or promo videos or music videos or whatever it is that you're making, stabilization is going to be key. It's going to be important. You don't want people saying when they're watching your work, man, his videos or her videos are really shaky, it's really distracting, just doesn't look very professional. You're going to have a progression. You're going to get better. You're going to grow. So if your videos are a little shaky or you have shots that just don't look very good, that's fine. You're growing. You're going to get better. You're going to start somewhere. So I'm at a place right now where I'm sure in 5 years, I'm gonna look back on the videos that I'm making right now and be like, Jordan, dude, what are you doing? So I wanna move forward in humility, just knowing that I'm growing. But right now, after hearing that from that couple, I wanna emphasize that. So the question here is, how do you stabilize your footage? How do you get smooth footage? All right, so number one, stabilizing the camera itself. So I'm gonna give you 3 ways to do this. Number one, tripod, locking it off on a tripod. Now, if you want to do some movement with that, because movement in a video does add emotion. It does add to the video really becoming more dynamic. So if you're going to be doing movements, make sure that you have a video head tripod, one that has the handle on the back that you can move with. So if you're going to be doing panning or tilting or any of that, make sure that you have that type of tripod and make sure that you're practicing. Make sure you know the feel of your tripod so that you're not going to go or whip it really fast, because that's going to be just as bad as having some shaky footage of you trying to use your tripod and doing movement with the camera and it's still not working for you. So make sure that you're practicing. But if you're not very good at it, I think you can still just lock it off on your tripod and get lots of great shots within your tripod. If you're not comfortable moving your camera yet, if you're brand new, you're not really sure how all this works, tripod is a great way to start to get some of the basics down. That's something that you're going to want to tell the couple if you're doing your first wedding, probably doing it for free, and you're just going to use a tripod and keep it steady. Then you're probably just going to let them know they're not going to have a ton of movement of the camera. It's not going to look like a lot of what maybe they've seen on the internet. So just make sure that they know that, but that's one way to keep it so it's clean and crisp, and you're not going to be dealing with all kinds of shake. It's just going to be a really clean video. Number 2 would be a monopod. Now that is a lot more popular for wedding videographers. It's a lot more mobile, so you can move from place to place. You can also do more movement with it, so you can move the entire stick of the monopod back and forth in a more smooth, but also more variation in the movement you can do, more than just panning and tilting. You're also going to want to have a video head on that as well, so it'll be a fluid head on there so you can turn that, pan, tilt, but you can also move the stick of the monopod around as well. So you have more options with moving your camera, but you also have the option of just locking it off and having it straight up and down and keeping it really steady and clean, just like we talked about with the tripod. So that's one other way to stabilize the camera itself. And option number 3 would be a glide cam or steady cam or gimbal. So you could go like the glide cam route, which is not electronic. It's more, you're gonna have to really practice with how to use it, how to balance it, all that. And then with a gimbal, it's electronic. I use a glide cam all day long because I don't want to deal with balancing it and taking the camera off and on and switching around, because I have one camera, so I don't want to have to switch things around all the time. And I like just having movement in my shots. I just really like it. So that's another option for you as well. But with that, that's going to require the most practice. You're going to need to use that thing quite a bit. So even if you're doing your first wedding, you probably want a decent amount of lead time to get to practice with it outside, even maybe with wind, so you can get a feel of how to get smooth shots without bouncing up and down or without your hand shaking all over the place, how to grip it, how to grip a glide cam with your opposite hand, and you're not going to squeeze it, but you're just going to kind of gently balance it. All of those things you're going to want to practice. There's plenty of YouTube tutorials on all that, so I'm not going to get into that. So those are just 3 ways to stabilize the camera itself. Now past that, you can shoot in a higher frame rate, 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second, and slow it down in post. So they're going to be twice as slow or maybe even 5 times as slow, and that is going to stabilize your footage because it's taking a fraction of what you actually shot, and it's going to take that portion. So if you have lots of bouncing and shaking, it's going to slow that down so it has the appearance that it's not really shaking that much, it's just a fluid movement. Now, if you're shaking a ton, then you'll probably start to notice how much it's moving, but slow motion really does help to stabilize your footage and give it a smooth, clean look. All right, tip number 3 is shooting at a wider angle. So if you are zoomed all the way in, every little jitter is going to show more of a shake. Every little movement is going to seem like more of a movement. So if you move your camera an inch to the left, it's going to pan a further way because you're so zoomed in. But if you're zoomed out and you move your camera an inch, it's gonna barely even look like it moved. So maybe if you're shooting handheld for some reason, shooting at a wider angle might be helpful in stabilizing and smoothing out your footage. All right, number 4. Now every camera is different. I don't know your budget. I don't know what you're going for, what you're shooting. I'm not sure. But a lot of cameras have in-body image stabilization, and a lot of lenses have image stabilization as well, so that'd be helpful. So if you're shooting handheld, even if you're shaking, the camera will stabilize on its own. So if you buy certain types of cameras, they're just really, really good at this type of thing. It's gonna help you not have so much shake, especially those little micro shakes. Now last but not least, tip number 5 is your editing software. They typically have some sort of stabilization feature. So if you have a lot of shake in your footage, you can turn on, I think in Premiere it's warp stabilization, and Final Cut Pro is just a stabilization option on there, and then you can change the settings of how much you want it to change, but that's going to crop in your image a bit, and if you're really shaking a lot or moving all kinds of crazy ways, it's going to warp your footage a good bit. Now there are different workarounds for that. You can go into After Effects, do some things to fix it, but if you're not trying to do all that, what you really want to do is get it as stable as you can before you get it into your editing system. So obviously I put this as tip number 5 because you don't want to have to use this very much, but if you need to, it can be really, really effective. I used it before and it smoothed out my footage so nicely in places where I was a little shaky. But when I'm shaking quite a bit, it typically just kind of warps my footage and makes it look all goofy, even worse than just the shaking. And then a bonus tip here, I've seen this a decent amount, like at the end of a clip, there's some shake or you're like moving the camera, but you don't cut it before you start to move your camera. So the shot looks good, and then all of a sudden you see the camera move a little bit, but you didn't make the cut before you started to move. So make sure you're cutting in a way that makes your footage look clean. So if you have a really good shot, don't ruin it by having at the very end a little, movement with your camera. So make sure you're paying attention to those details in your video, because those are also gonna make it look clean. So when a potential client is looking at your video saying, this looks really clean, really sharp, really professional, I'm not distracted by what's happening with the camera. So that's another tip too. Just make sure in editing, you're checking and seeing if you can edit out even certain parts where you have some good stuff and then maybe some shake. Because it's okay if you're not smooth all the time. It's just in editing, you have ways to fix that. So make sure you're taking advantage and paying attention to that. All right, so those are my tips on getting smooth, stabilized footage for your wedding films and whatever work that you are doing out there. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Have a lot more videos like this on the channel. Give this video a like. It's really helpful apparently for YouTube. They like when people like it, so they make it higher in the rankings or whatever. But if you hated this video and you don't want it to be higher in the rankings, then don't do it. All right, thanks so much for watching, everybody, and we'll see you all in the next video.